Chapter 12, Never Forsaken. John 9:17. Jesus carried his own cross. Jesus carried the cross for the entire world. Surely I can carry this one for me. I trusted the Lord and I know He loved me. When He said He would never leave me nor forsake me, I took Him at His word. No matter what came upon me, God was going to be right there. Besides, I belong to Him and He belongs to me. Miracles were already in the mix. Even though things were not looking well, there was a little ray of sunshine, even if it looked cloudy. That whisper voice in the back of my ear always reassured me everything is not what it seemed. The worse it became, the more strength I would gain. God was working on my behalf. Another month went by. I continued taking the injections, relying on this process to work. This was our last bit of hope, preventing me from going on a dialysis machine. Then came the words from my doctor that I hoped to never hear. Unfortunately, the injections were not working. My heart dropped to the floor after hearing that news. I was so sure this was going to work. I would pray over the needle before injecting it into my stomach. The bruises that covered my body was turning black and blue. I was running out of places to stick the needle. This is going to work. I was sure of it. I knew what was coming next. I was not prepared to hear. Even though in my mind I rejected the thought, my options had become few, and it was a matter of living or dying, leaving me with no option. When the doctor called and asked us to come to his office, I already knew what was waiting for me. God was preparing me for the news the doctor was going to share. I began to pray and ask God for His mighty strength. Ironically, my prayer was geared more to my husband and not myself. This news was not going to be well with him. The bond we shared is simply amazing and like no other. My husband was my soulmate, created by God just for me. He is my friend, partner in life, my gift, a God-fearing man that loved the Lord with all his heart and soul. I can bear witness to this because we have been married 31 years, and his life is an example of what he taught and preached. I knew this news that we were about to receive was going to change the course of our lives. Even though the words were going to be hard to hear, my mind and heart was not going to be very receptive. I will respect the doctor's diagnosis, but my faith was in God. And I put all my trust in Him, and God gets the final decision and says on what happens. When we were arriving at the doctor's office, the receptionist immediately showed us to a room where we were to wait for the doctor. I watched the concerned look on my husband's face. My heart started racing because of what was going to be the worst news I could imagine. My doctor entered the room along with his nurse and another colleague that I had never seen before. Everything felt different when the door shut behind. They all tried to have a pleasant smile on their face, but at the same time, I knew the news were not going to be good. My doctor introduced the new colleague to us and shared he was a practitioner and wanted to sit in while delivering the results to us. He then said, "We have tried everything that could be done to prevent you from going on dialysis, pending the last test where I had to inject myself with medication daily through a medical trial. But the results showed that it did not move the needle." At that moment, my husband abruptly got up and left the room. I can see the tears in his eyes and my heart fell to the floor. Not so much for me, but the sadness and the hurt that he was feeling. I had already prepared myself because based on how my body was responding to the medication, I did not feel confident that it was working. I remained optimistic and had hope that things would turn around on my behalf. Even then, at that moment, all my faith and trust was in the Lord. I did not care what the doctor was going to say. It was clear to me that God was going to heal me, and from that moment, nothing else would ever affect my spirit. And I began that day to pray for my healing. I felt calm and peaceful. Even though I'm about to receive devastating news about my health situation. My doctor said it was important that my husband be there to hear our plan of action going forth. I told them to give him a minute to process because this was going to be difficult news. While waiting for my husband to return into the room, my doctor began to apologize in advance because he knew this was the last thing I wanted to hear. A few minutes later, my husband came back into the room and stood beside me holding my hand. I looked at him and said, "It's going to be okay. God's got this." My doctor then said those words, "I am so sorry you would have to go on dialysis." He continued by saying, "We have tried everything we could to prevent this from happening, but there is no other alternative left. The one kidney that I had left was increasingly getting worse, and if we did not get a handle on it right away, things would not look good for me. This would have a significant impact on my life." The atmosphere was serious, and the laughter and the joy that I had experienced when I arrived at my doctor's office had disappeared. My doctor was very professional and had a great bedside manner. He tried to explain everything most respectfully. He said that I had two options, peritoneal or hemodialysis. Hemodialysis is a procedure where a dialysis machine and a special filter called an artificial kidney are used to clean your blood. The very thought of being hooked up to a tube, having blood coming in and out of my body, was not sitting well with me. I completely rejected that idea before my doctor could even tell me what he was proposing for treatment. There would have to be another way because I was not going to do this. My mind was already made up before coming to the doctor that day. I did not share my thoughts with my husband because I knew it would make matters worse, and I did not want to worry him any more than he was already. My body was in so much pain due to the bad blood that was in my system. If I were honest with myself, any treatment would have been welcomed. Option 1 was off the table for me. The suggestion was peritoneal dialysis, also known as PD, which was a treatment for the kidney that uses the lining of your abdomen or belly to filter your blood inside your body. I didn't understand the procedure for peritoneal, but it sounds a little better than hemodialysis. My doctor attempted to explain the difference between both treatments, suggesting the peritoneal would be a better treatment for me. At that moment, my brain was not registering anything, neither one of them. I remember thinking, this is not happening. I was merely dreaming. Soon I would awaken and this nightmare would be over. This could not be happening to us. We have been through so much, finally established and situated. Now this. What kind of cruel joke is being played here? But the reality was, I was going to be hooked up to a machine one way or the other. My doctor, nurse, and his colleague left the room to allow us a moment to process what we just heard. My husband looked at me with such compassion that tears streamed down his face. It was an exceedingly difficult moment for both of us. I assured him that everything was going to be all right. I told him God did not bring us this far to leave us. We were going to make it through this because by faith I was already healed. For reasons unknown at that time, there was a purpose for what was happening. It would be revealed to us when the time was right. I remember thanking God for His grace and His mercy at that moment for sending us here to Florida. This was not the end of my journey, but only the beginning. I took a stand that day and said, whatever it takes, I will overcome this. The anxiety and the fear I had before going to the doctor to get my results had faded away. The devil had his opportunity that morning when fear came into play. Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 37. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loves us. I told my husband to let us go home and rejoice in what God had already done. Whatever treatment was necessary to fight this disease, I was ready to have it. I was not going to let this condition get the last word without a fight. My doctor came back into the room alone and expressed to me again how sorry he was. I told him it's okay, and together with God's help, we're going to beat this. He knew I was a woman of faith. It was no surprise to him by my reaction. He said having a great attitude is healing for the body. I knew the battle was just getting started, but I made a vow to myself and to the Lord. I told myself that complaining was not an option. There would be none of that, because not only would it not solve the problem, but it could also very well cause the problem to worsen by speaking negative energy. My body needed to heal, therefore I could not allow anything negative to penetrate my spirit. I will not complain. My vow to the Lord was, not if, but when you heal me, I will let the entire world know it was you that did it. There is absolutely nothing too hard for God to solve. He has brought me through so much, and there was work for me to do in His kingdom. I needed to be well and whole to finish the job that was assigned to me. There is a purpose for each one of us that was already assigned to us when we were born. God reveals it to us at His appointed time. We must listen for that small voice whispering, God's angels protecting us. We got our instructions from the doctor, and the next step was preparing the process for dialysis. We left the office, got into the car. I remember staring out the window in disbelief about what was getting ready to take place. Several emotions were going on within me. I wanted to scream, cry, yell at the trees, even ask the dreaded question, why me? Even though this was happening, my concern was how this is affecting my husband. He was my rock, and I did not want this to crumble both of us. Peritoneal dialysis is different from hemodialysis, both serving the same purpose but administered differently. PD requires hours of training, and it was vital to have a partner to assist. Never in my wildest dreams could I imagine myself being in this position. After getting a better understanding of what I was going to have to endure, we scheduled to get the catheter inserted into my abdomen so the process could begin. The thought of having something attached to my body that God did not put there mentally was a little hard to comprehend. This was only not the beginning of what was going to take place. I am thinking, how on earth am I going to get through this? Lord, you are going to have to help me every step of the way. Being a woman, when it comes to my body, not vanity, but because I took pride in my appearance, this was going to be an adjustment. The catheter had to come out of my body to the surface of my belly with a tube connected to the machine that was going to be used to administer the solution that cleansed the blood. The very thought made me feel a bit queasy. I remember waking up from this procedure and looking down at this tube sticking out of my body that was about 12 inches long with a cap at the end of it. Oh my God, is this happening? There were some discomforts from the procedure, but it did not compare to the thought of how this was going to change my life going forth. I was trying my best to be strong for my husband, but tears were flowing from my eyes. I did not know what to expect next, even though it had been explained to me in detail what was going to happen. It is one thing to hear, another to go through it. I did not start immediately on the dialysis. My body had to heal a little from the procedure. In the meantime, we had to prepare our home for this process. Everything had to be in place. This required extreme sterilization. There were classes we had to attend even before being considered a suitable candidate to be a PD patient. My husband and I had to take these courses. It requires someone to be in training with me. If there should be any reasons that would cause me not to be able to take care of myself, my husband would have to have the ability to care for me and do what was needed. My amazing husband was my caregiver. Even though I could do it myself, everything I learned my husband knew and was right there every step of the way. Our life took a complete turn with all the responsibilities we had already. Because of the severity of my condition, my doctor suggested that I would be on PD every day for 9 hours. That meant I would hook myself up to a machine manually at 10 o'clock p.m. every night and stay on it until the process was complete at 7 o'clock a.m. the next morning. Once I was hooked to the machine, there would be no getting off until the process was fully completed. In addition to the tube that was attached to my belly, I also had a 12-foot extension tube that could be connected, allowing me to move around the house. It was important to have the machine set up in the room where I slept. Of course, that'd be in my bedroom. My apartment was small, and the extra tubing gave me movement throughout the apartment. I was unable to reach the front door to the apartment, but I did have access to the kitchen. I was restricted to certain areas. I am extremely claustrophobic. Being attached and not having the ability to get free was going to take some getting used to. I was also diagnosed with severe sleep apnea, which meant losing the airflow while sleeping, causing me to stop breathing. I had to have a CPAP machine to treat this condition. The machine required me to wear a mask over my head that would send air pressure to my nose, allowing me to breathe normally. There was a machine coming from my face and one coming from my belly that I was attached to every night. Only God would be able to help me through this ordeal. Because of the bad fluids that accumulated in my body, my kidneys did not function. The first thing that needed to be done was to drain the fluids using the machine by attaching a cord from my catheter in my belly to pump the waste out of me to replace it with a new liquid solution. A new dialysis solution is put in through the catheter to fill the peritoneal cavity. With assistance of the machine, the new solution sits in the body for 2 hours, dwelling, and automatically drains the bad fluids. This process happened 4 times throughout the night. During this period, the dialysis solution stayed in the peritoneal cavity. This is when the dialysis occurs and the solution is collecting the waste and excess fluids from my body. After 9 hours and the process is complete, it was essential to protect my catheter and exit site from any germs. This was a very delicate procedure. Germs would cause infections that would be very devastating for me. This is when my husband went the extra mile to protect me from any germs or bacteria that can cause or may occur. My husband, my caretaker, was the best nurse I could have had. When it came to germs, my husband was extremely attentive. My process required serious preparations. The room had to be well lit and away from any drafts or open windows. Fans had to be turned off and free from any clutter. There could be no pets in the room, even though we did not have any. This procedure became a part of our lives. Everything had to be carefully executed. When this is not a part of our normal routine and suddenly you must adjust to a new way of living, it could come as a shock. We took the vows for sickness and in health very seriously. There are absolutely no words to describe how he took care of me. I remember when the shipment of fluids was delivered to our apartment, each box weighing 24 pounds. They delivered a month's supply, meaning 30 boxes at 24 pounds came to our one-bedroom apartment. There was hardly enough room to store them. They had to be kept in a cool area. My husband converted our pantry to a storage room, and when they all could not fit, we had to put some in our closet that we both shared. Sacrifices had to be made. This was our new way of life. My husband made sure I was not present for the first delivery. Somehow, he knew it would take a toll on me, so he insisted that I run an errand to keep me from seeing the boxes being delivered. I would never forget the sadness on his face when I returned to the apartment. I can see that he had been crying, and that was so hard for me to deal with. He showed me where everything was stored. When the door of the pantry opened, I took in a deep breath, seeing all the boxes stacked from the floor to the ceiling. All of this for me? Is this happening? The reality set in. I have this catheter in my stomach, a machine in the room, and now boxes of fluids that would keep me alive. Jesus, I am going to need you right now. Our entire way of living and lifestyle has now changed. Everything we did had to take place before 10 o'clock p.m. Afterwards, I would be attached to a machine for the duration of the night. The sacrifice my husband made for me was simply amazing. His job was not an easy task. He made sure everything that needed to be taken care of was done. Gauze, tape, masks, antiseptics, alcohol, etc. was provided. He took inventory of my equipment and made sure I never ran out of any medications or products. He made sure the house was sterile and would not allow anyone in my presence that was not properly prepared, meaning they had to always wear masks and gloves. For sanitation purposes, he did not allow anyone to enter my room without removing their shoes or offering them cloth shoe coverings. Our environment had to be completely free from any germs or bacteria. Any infections that I may encounter could very well be devastating for me. There could be no room for errors. With understanding, my friends would sometimes tease me and say, "We're going to have to wear a spacesuit to see you." I would sometimes laugh and say, "We all must follow his rules because it's good for my good." The love that he showed me was priceless. I was extremely blessed to have him as my husband, nurse, and best friend, not to mention my pastor, which would encourage me with the Word of God when I felt weary. There is simply no shortage of descriptions for my husband. The situation already being difficult, it could have been even worse if not for him being there with me. The mental, physical, and spiritual toll that I was experiencing can be put into words. Mentally, it was affecting my feelings, thinking how I was going to act. This was incredibly stressful, but did not want it to determine how I would relate to others. Physically, my body was in so much discomfort and distress, having acute shooting pains constantly due to the disease that was ravaging it. Spiritually, because my belief was so strong in God, I had to rely on what brought me to my status. I knew this was my cross to bear and certainly a test of my faith. Waiting on the Lord to move on my behalf would require steadfast patience, and that is when my husband would remind me to hold on and wait for my change to come. Those words alone would give me the strength to press forward. It also gave me a boost of energy, reminded me that God was working on my behalf and it was okay to have a moment. I was also reminded when Jesus had a moment when he went to the cross.